far, come on in, is that...
Is this for the SEL curriculum?
Yes, empowering education. Is that what you're looking for? Yep.
Okay.
In the right place there.
Sorry.
No problem. Come on in. All right, there's more to see.
Hey, am I, wait, you're doing SEL? Okay. Do I do that?
So, as I was saying, what I've really loved about this conference is the level of personal connection and stories that I've been seeing. Like Barnaby stopped during lunch, and Matt's stories this morning in his kickoff. And I want to start with a little bit of how this curriculum was born and where it came from, because honestly, I think that's more important than the curriculum itself. And so this is a picture of Denver Green School. In 2013, I became the school counselor at the school and walked in those doors for the first time on the first day of school. And said to the principal and the administrators there, "What do you want me to do?" And they just said one student's name. And it was a third grade boy. And so I went to this classroom and nobody introduced me. I didn't have any way of knowing who the student was. But I walked into the classroom and there was this kid who was stabbing other kids with pencils and screaming and rolling around on the floor and crying and climbing on top of furniture and running away from the school and basically blowing out of the classroom every 5 minutes. Anybody know any students like that? Have a few of those. Anybody know what their stories are like before they got to you?
Not good.
5 foster homes, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mom was in jail for meth, dad was dead, all at 8 years old, and currently living with mom's ex-boyfriend who's also abusive. What's unique about this particular student, he also had an IQ of 145, so smarter than most adults in the building. And for me, he was just really likable, but I was also at a deep loss of what to do with him. This curriculum didn't exist yet. I was just like, oh. So I went to my supervisor and I said, what should I do? And he said, do this. Every day for 15 minutes, show up at the same time and just do what he wants to do. Don't do any like counseling or intervention or therapy or lessons, just play. If he wants to play, play. If he doesn't want to play, just sit there. We did that for 2 years, every day, from 10 to 10:15. And guess what happened when he did those 2 years? He got better, yeah. He was functioning. He was going on field trips. He was able to stay in the class. He was doing well in school. And all of that was simply a product of relationship, which is the heart of this curriculum for me. And what I'll say is that if you do nothing else except what I just spoke about, which is form positive relationships with your students, especially the ones who don't have those in their life, that's far more valuable than anything I could offer you in this curriculum. And that's really the intention of this curriculum, is that it's coming from it's a framework to support positive relationships. It's not the end-all be-all of social and emotional learning. The other reason I bring up Denver Green School, that's where this curriculum was born. So in addition to helping that student every day and hanging out with him and getting punched a few times, I was dropping into every class every day, every week for 15 minutes teaching an SEL lesson. And at the time, I didn't have a curriculum. What I discovered, I don't know if any of you are in this position, I was tasked with teaching social emotional learning, but I couldn't find one place that had all the stuff I wanted to teach in the way I wanted to teach it. I was like, well, this curriculum has that, and I'm going to pull from that. And this one has mindfulness, and this one has conflict resolution, and this one has brain science. I can maybe mash it all together in a way that might work. And so my reason for creating this curriculum is simply because I needed something like it. And that's what we tried to create. And so if you all know Castle's 5 implementation areas. If you don't, here they are. So these are the 5 different ways that we, conceptually can think of SEL being taught in schools. And notice that explicit skills instruction, which is this right here, is just one piece. And in my opinion, it's using the word least important makes it sound like it's not. It is. But when we compare it to teacher instructional practices and well-being and self-care and how we integrate this stuff the rest of the day, what do we do besides the 15 minutes of SEL once a week? What does our school feel like when we walk in the building? Do we feel safe? Does it feel fun? Does it feel positive? And then how are families and any other community partnerships after school programs integrating this and supporting what we do? And I also found that I couldn't find a curriculum that hit all of these 5 SEL implementation approaches. So that's what we tried to create. Empowering Minds is just the result of a lot of trial and error and figuring out what worked for me as a school counselor trying to teach this stuff. And what I found was that these were the 4 main theories I wanted to pull from. Just my background as a community organizer in mental health and cognitive neuroscience. I liked this stuff, but I couldn't find one curriculum. They were all just focused on one aspect. So we blended all of these. This is cognitive behavioral theory, restorative conflict resolution, brain-based learning, and then mindfulness. And then it also hits all of these implementation spots. So in a moment, Charlie's actually going to walk you through what is the curriculum, how does it work, what does it look like, and we'll take a look at one specific lesson. But our solution to all of this was really to create something where what you'll see is that each lesson has a core content component, which is the 20 to 30 minute piece once a week that's experiential in nature. So that's the deep dive where students actually, rather than talking about emotions, get to have an experience of emotions, or get to have an experience of collaboration and critical thinking or mindfulness. And then each lesson also comes with an academic extension. So this is a curated list of books, literature resources, informational texts that align with the theme of each core content lesson, and then also includes common core aligned writing prompts so that theoretically you could do the core content lesson, you could read a book aligned with the theme of that lesson, and then you could have your students respond to a writing prompt that furthers their thinking and reflections and integration of that concept. We also have embedded in each lesson recommendations for how to blow this out to a school-wide level and impact school culture and policy. Each lesson includes an at-home resource. So you can share it electronically or print it out. It's a one-page handout for parents that includes big ideas, resources, practices, ways to reinforce it at home. And then one of the big things that I think makes our program unique, and you'll see this, a big issue I've seen with social emotional learning programs is what I just refer to it as the training gap. And it's this idea that, a program provider will come in at the beginning of the year and spend 2 hours with you and it's great, and then you never see them again. Well, what do I do with the rest of this curriculum? And our answer to that was to create a video tutorial for each lesson, between 5 and 10 minutes long, where you actually get to see the lesson being taught by another teacher in a real classroom, and then have some voiceover and narrations and sort of didactic learning strategies for you as a teacher to integrate these concepts. Because not every teacher has a master's in counseling. And so, it's helpful to get some background on what is all this and how am I using it. Teacher practices and self-care is what, the note on that we do a lot of training on that in terms of teaching mindfulness and self-care strategies for teachers. But the other big thing, where we might be distinct from someone like medical schools who's next door. They do great work, no diss on them, but their approach is very much to say you have to really be an expert on mindfulness before you can teach it. And so practice for 3 years before you even consider teaching it in a classroom. And we pretty much take the opposite approach, and we say, hey, anyone with a sincere intention, and that part is important, your attitude. If you don't believe in this stuff, absolutely don't teach it. There's research to say that students will get worse. But if you believe in it and you're willing to learn alongside your students and not be the expert, anyone ever heard of beginner's mindset? It's a common phrase in mindfulness circles. So if you can adopt that beginner's mindset, we think anyone is capable of both teaching and learning this. And for me, this is just how I work, teaching something is how I learn it the best. And so what I found with teachers is that when I finally stopped dropping into classrooms and teaching lessons for them, and I said, hey, you've seen me do this for 2 years, why don't you do it now? They started integrating these concepts in a much deeper way, and they'd be coming to me like, Cody, my marriage is way better, thanks. Now we know how to handle conflict. So part of our philosophy is that you learn as you go, and that these lessons are just as much for you as a teacher as they are for your students. Here's a quick look at our scope and sequence. It's a little small, so you might not be able to see it all, but we cover the whole. It's not just mindfulness; it's also communication strategies like I statements, active listening, conflict resolution strategies, neuroscience, dealing with bullying, social justice and privilege, self-compassion. Really, what I felt was the full spectrum of experience there, and set up in a way that hopefully, what we encourage schools to aim for is this school-wide approach. where, the same week, the kindergarten classroom and the 8th grade classroom is learning the same lesson. Everybody's learning about I statements or mindful body. And this is important because that is just going to like sort of cross-pollinate and generate way more depth and breadth in your social emotional learning program than if it were just being taught in one classroom. Because suddenly, brother and sister are going home and being like, I learned about that today too. And you just see that it sort of embeds itself within the school culture and that the curriculum becomes a catalyst for the culture shift that we're all hoping for. So what I'll do here, I'll show you a 2-minute video of students talking about their experience with this curriculum. These are all students that I know and love, and this was all unprompted, just like, hey, what do you think of mindfulness and social emotional learning? And then Charlie's going to walk us through the different curriculum components.
If you have students who can't see well, you don't say, try harder. You don't just say, like, look harder. Sometimes people need assistance in order to have success socially and emotionally, and there's a skill set that's required, there's knowledge that's required, there's practice that's required.
I felt happy about what we were doing because it helps me understand how other people feel and how I feel, because we're talking about feelings and we're talking about other people's feelings so we can know them better.
And I sit up and then I'm just like aware of whatever. Yeah, just makes my day better.
Watching them come and go, like clouds in the wind, and if clouds start to hover or fester, that's kind of like your negative thoughts.
We provide more than just a set of lessons. We've brought together the best in evidence-based practices to provide you and your students with a year-long social-emotional experience that will ultimately support the head and the heart.
I feel relaxed. I feel happy.
I wasn't like running around getting mad. I was getting calmer, and it felt pretty good because I was like.
Our structured curriculum and training courses empower teachers with the knowledge and skills needed to make high-quality, school-wide implementation a real possibility.
What do you think is going to happen?
Mindful walking, mindful listening, mindful eating,
Take a brain break and send happy thoughts. And that's one of the things we do. Send happy thoughts to other people so they can.
I feel like a clear explosion of calmness happens daily. I feel calm. And I did mindful breathing because I thought she was going to get mad at me more, so I just blocked out all the sound. Because she sounded good and I thought I wasn't going to be good at it, so I just calmed down for a little bit and I just did, and I got a good grade for it.
It's just a real nice day.
So if you didn't hear that last little girl, whoops, what she said was, I feel safe. And when students feel safe, they learn, which is pretty much the bottom line for me, and why when I introduced this curriculum, I just always emphasized for teachers that this is about much more than the curriculum. And if you get into a lesson and it's not working, or if the lesson's not set up in a way that's congruent for who you are as a person, it's much more important that you pause and actually focus on the relationship in that moment and really ask yourself, like, how do I improve my relationship with my students in this moment rather than how do I finish this lesson? So just to reemphasize that this curriculum is designed as a framework and not a specific thing that you have to follow word for word. But you'll get to see that there are a lot of supports where you could do that. So Charlie's going to take us through that.
Your computer's not to die.
Oh.
Not the ever charger.
I'll try to grab that.
Cool. So, like Cody said, I'm just going to walk through the curriculum. We have some printed copies here, but for the most part, all of the teachers who use the curriculum just use it through the online platform. So this is our website. If it's something when you leave here today that you're interested in, you can pick up our card or brochure, sign up here. You can get access to the free trial. So that's the first 5 lessons for about 2 weeks, just so you can play around with it for a little bit.
Sorry, everyone. There we go.
Cool. So, you'll see on the homepage there's a lot of really good resources here on the program. So more just about what Empowering Minds curriculum is, a lot of evidence with some of the research and the studies that we've had that have found increases in things like persistence and compassion, main questions for teachers, free sample, pricing, which we can talk about a little later if you're interested. And then the main part is the curriculum. So we are a K-8 curriculum that's differentiated in 3 tiers. So we have K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8. So there are 30 lessons for each grade level. So today I just want to look through this Mind and Matter one at 3, 5. There it goes. Yeah, it's
Technical difficulties, bear with us.
So, like Cody talked about, each one of our lessons will have a 5 to 10 minute video for the teacher to watch before teaching. So just to give a little sample.
Emotions. To feel them.
This lesson explores the connection between the mind and body.
So the videos will give the teachers an opportunity to see the lessons modeled by other teachers, for them to kind of get a grasp of what the main parts of the lesson will be. Also for them to see if there's any materials that they'll need. So this is a training opportunity for every lesson. And then to get into the actual core content lessons, this is what each one will look like. On the top corner, there'll be the grade level, how long each lesson will take, and then the main concepts that that lesson will cover. And then the big ideas. So this will be kind of to ground the teacher into what the lesson will be over, any ideas that they should go over beforehand, if there's any vocabulary. So a lot of these have research and articles for teachers to read. And then, like curriculums have, we have key vocabulary that teachers will go over throughout the lesson. If there's any materials, the blue link clips will lead to that. So like for this lesson, there's a body map activity that is included, and then any preparations that the teacher might need to do beforehand. And then all of our lessons follow the I do, we do, you do model. So the teacher will start a conversation, and like Cody mentioned, if a teacher's really unfamiliar or uncomfortable with teaching mindfulness or SEL, they can use this as a scripted curriculum. So everything with the green bar next to it, the teacher can read. Or if they're comfortable with this, they can really just use this as a resource and use it as a way for some guiding questions. So the I do usually will have the teacher ask some big questions like, can we feel emotions in our body? What does it mean to feel emotions in your body? What's an example of an emotion in your body? To get the conversation started. And with this specific lesson, the teacher would lead about a 5-minute body scan. So there's a script here that the teacher can simply read for their students, as well as over here, a few other different body scans. So if a teacher wants to play some of these different scripts, and some of them are audio recordings. And then the you do component, then the students would work on a worksheet after the body scan to see and explain the emotions that they felt in their body. So this says, identify 3 to 5 emotions you have, close your eyes and use the body scan to find the places, use colors, symbols, or abstract art to draw where you felt emotions. So I observed this lesson a couple weeks ago at a school, and it was really awesome to see all the different ways that students were drawing, like teardrops over their heart, or yellow sunshine coming out of their heads after the body scan activity. And then this component for every lesson will have some things that you can reflect on as a class through discussion, some journal prompts if your students are using SEL journals, and then extensions for the classroom. So other things that you could do to extend this to a further conversation, as well as that school-wide approach. So different posters you could put up, different activities you could do in different parts of the school. And then all of the references, as well as any materials you would need. So here we have body map of oceans, and then this worksheet.
What grade level was that? Or
This
what?
one is the 3-5.
The 3-5.
Yeah. And then another thing that Empowering Education offers are academic extensions. So this is something that a lot of administrators really like with the program. So you can take the concepts of this mind matter 3-5 lesson and continue it through different ways. Here are some student texts that all of these blue links are hyperlinks to Amazon, so you can order any of these books, as well as different Common Core standard aligned writing tasks, self-assessment checklists. Further teacher resources, if it's something they're really interested in to continue their own research of readings and videos, and then Common Core standards alignment, as well as because we're based out of Colorado, we include Colorado state standards. Yes?
Is the whole curriculum available in Spanish?
It's not yet. We haven't gotten the funding to translate it yet, but that's definitely on our to-do list.
Is there like, we work with middle schoolers who,
Emotional disorder.
yeah, and just the SEL component, you put a worksheet in front of them and it's not gonna fly,
Mhm.
So I do a lot of discussion and showing video clips and things like that. Are there components like that in there, like activities? And,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is just one of the lessons that has a worksheet. Most of the lessons don't have necessarily a worksheet component. There's a lot of videos embedded,
Oh, good.
different
Okay.
activities you can do as a class. So
Because
it's
for SEL, they do not want to do any writing or,
Right.
they
I
might
can
do a checklist or something like that.
Speak to that a little further too. I mean, the intention with this curriculum is definitely that it's experiential. That's my
Mhm.
background as a wilderness therapist instructor. So we tried to make it super engaging. And the other piece is there's an interesting piece of research, it should be up on our website. At Denver Green School in particular, we had a grad student who was interested in the difference between how Tier 3 students and Tier 1 students would respond to a program. So what he did was actually use one of those behavioral tracking apps where he was looking every 10 seconds, comparing this student to their peer in relationship to the SEL lessons over time, over the year. And what he found was that the Tier 3 behavior students improved at the same rate as their peers, simply from being exposed or in the classroom at the time of the lesson, whether or not they were engaged. So different starting point, different ending point, but the general theme of improvement was still there for those Tier 3 students.
Okay. Yeah, because that's, what I'm doing right now, like you were saying earlier, I'm coming up with different things, sort of piecemeal, but, the common thread is like they don't want to do any writing or anything like that. So I'm trying to generate discussions and show them clips that they can relate to and just like that. So I'll do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last component from this page are the at-home resources. So every lesson also has a 1 to 2 page handout that you can either send home via email or print out for parents or family members to see what the students are talking about learning in SEL, some of the key vocabulary so that they can use that language at home as well. Some guided practice activities for families to do, and then any additional resources that students or parents might need. The last part I want to walk through is this resource library. So these are just some extra materials that are also included. So there's glossary of all the terms by A to Z, by units, this is a resource of different really quick and simple breath and movement activities that teachers can lead. More information just about our curriculum, that scope and sequence that Cody showed, some inclusive trauma-informed practices. At the K2 level, this is a journal that the students can use throughout the semester, different types of worksheets, all the material lists that are not included, as well as at-home resources. And as one additional thing with the 6-8 program for all of the lessons, there's also PowerPoints to go along with all the lessons if that's something you're interested in. So are there any questions about the curriculum at this point or just the website?
Yes.
Do you have to do the lessons in order, or can you pick and choose depending on what you're learning about at that time?
Yeah, I can speak to that. In general, we recommend following our sequence because there are some lessons that build on previous lessons.
Okay.
That said, if a lesson does build on a previous lesson, it'll tell you in that big ideas section.
Okay.
And we have plenty of teachers in schools that have like totally deconstructed our scope and sequence, and then they do things like they have their character themes for each month, so we help them align our lessons to their character themes. Or they just prioritize, they're like, we can't wait until whatever it is to talk about bullying, we need to talk about that now.
Right.
So you can totally do it. The biggest thing we encourage you to do is be on the same page as the rest of your team and the rest of your school if you're doing this in a more integrated approach.
Okay. Thank you.
I might have missed this because I came in a little late, but if a district were to purchase this, or even a school, how would the training component look? What is provided?
So right now we're in the tail end of wrapping up development of an online training course that any district or school could just pick up and implement without needing to fly us in and do that sort of thing. In most cases, if it's just like one school, we're the whole team, and so we can't be everywhere. But in the case of like a larger district purchase, we could definitely arrange to do like a district-wide training or a multi-day, multi-school training.
So it does require an actual in-person training in most cases?
I mean, what we typically do with our in-person trainings is we focus pretty heavily on the buy-in, because there's tons of research that says if you're not bought in and teachers aren't bought in, then even if you're teaching high-quality SEL lessons, student outcomes go worse. So we know buy-in is really the most important piece of SEL. So we do a lot of sort of engaging teachers' implicit buy-in and their why, as well as some background on mindfulness practices and then trauma-informed practices. So sort of understanding the neurobiology of trauma.
And is that what those videos for each lesson?
Those videos are specific to teaching the lesson, so they'll
Yeah.
include little snippets here and there of those types of things.
Okay.
The online training courses that will be out in the next month or two are going to have all of our trainings online.
But those are not necessarily required to teach.
No, the intention,
they're-
really the intention with this curriculum is that anybody can pick up a lesson and with 5 to 10 minutes of preparation walk into the classroom and teach it. So,
Just,
yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, it's both twofold. It sounds like a school could just move forward with it with
Totally.
accessing the material, or
Yeah.
there would be training available.
Yeah.
But it would be more about the process, not actually how to do the lesson.
Right, and we could do both.
And if you bought like one online packet, could you share that with?
It's typically, we sort of operate in good faith, and so we're a nonprofit functioning as a social enterprise, so we ask that if you purchase one license, you keep that for yourself, like one classroom per license.
Okay.
But our school-wide license you can purchase, and that's unlimited access for all the staff in the school,
Okay.
from front office staff to everyone in
Got it.
between. So,
Do you have a
I'm sure-
district license?
What's that?
Do you have district, like if we have 5 schools, could all 5 schools use it, or do we have to
Yeah,
buy
we do that case
5?
by case, so just get in touch with us and
Okay.
we just come up with a custom price for your district, you
Okay.
get a discount.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions about curriculum or anything like that? So we will offer you, if you're interested, a guided practice right now, a body scan. But before I do that, open discussion and Q&A is totally fine, or if you want to engage in the body scan, that's where we can move next. Okay. So I ask you to go ahead and find a comfortable position with your legs uncrossed and your hands in your lap. And what we're going to do, as we move into this body scan, I'm going to modify it a little bit because I know I've already seen a couple body scans at this conference so far. My sort of other identity is I'm a trauma therapist for adults in private practice right now. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview of how I would work with like trauma in session and for adults. And one of the key things is learning to be with intense and difficult stimuli in our body without shutting down or getting overwhelmed or overreacting. So I'm going to ask you in this moment to think of two memories. You don't have to do anything with them yet. The first memory, think of something in the last like week or two or month that was clearly stressful, but just mildly stressful. So not, a fight with your spouse or like the most stressful thing in your life right now, but something like I lost my keys or I was running late or somebody said something mean to me and you felt something in your body in that moment, but it wasn't overwhelming or going to shut you down. So take that memory and just put it on the shelf. We'll come back to it in a moment. And then also think of a memory that is think of like one of your top 5 most positive memories of your life. So words like transcendent and ineffable and timeless, a moment in nature, a moment with friends, a moment where like you totally lost track of time and you were in the flow and in the moment and you just felt nothing but good. And there's nothing in that memory that's going to trigger you otherwise. Got it? Okay. So what we'll do is we'll work with the stressful memory first, and we're going to do a bit of guided visualization while tracking body sensation. So for this first part, we're going to enter into something called containment. So if you're watching me right now, I'm talking with my hands and moving. These are all ways we have of blowing off stress, taking deep breaths. I'm going to encourage you for the next few minutes while we track this stressful sensation and memory to not use those coping mechanisms. So holding yourself more or less still. And if you feel the impulse to fidget or move, try to curb that impulse. Try not to take the deep breath. This is not going to be relaxing for the first part, but you also don't have to do it. So if it gets too stressful or too overwhelming, you can stop at any time. And then go ahead and close your eyes if you feel comfortable, or just look down at the floor in front of you. And as I'm speaking, I'm going to invite you to really pay attention to the internal space of your body. So before we even begin, just notice what's already happening in there. Is it tight? Is it loose? Is there anything that feels like an emotion or anything that feels particularly sticky? And as I cue you, what's important is that as soon as you feel a distinct sensation in relationship to this memory, you don't have to worry about the story or the thoughts anymore. Just focus on that sensation and see what it does. And in order to sort of cue this sensation up, I'm going to ask you to dream into that memory as if you're there now. So really focusing on the 5 senses. So what did you see in this mildly stressful moment? So what was the quality of the light? What was the time of day? What sort of shapes and objects and colors were around you? Where were you? Really getting a clear mental image of this moment of stress. And then continuing to deepen that memory. So what did you hear? Maybe somebody said something to you, or you said something to yourself in your head. Imagine that you can hear those things now. And as you do this, again, as soon as you notice anything in your body that feels like it might be stress or another challenging emotion, just focus on that sensation. Often that presents as tightness, contraction, heat, warmth. And if you haven't yet contacted that sensation, just keep deepening into that moment and that memory. So were there any smells? And what do you call about your physical sensation in that moment? As if it's happening now. How were you breathing? What were you touching, feeling, thinking? And for the next 30 seconds to 1 minute, allow yourself to be surprised by what your body does with this. Our mind often thinks it knows what's going to happen next or wants to predict. But if you can just track this sensation and stay with it, notice all the qualities it has without reacting. Does it have a shape, a color, a size? Does it move or get bigger or smaller? And does your mind respond with any other memories or emotions or thoughts as you feel what's happening in your body? Continue sitting with the sensation, just watching it. Before we move on, just notice, what is it you're feeling? Does it have a name? Is it stress? Is it something else? And have you felt this way before? And then as we transition, you can go ahead and relax your body. So any movements that feel good, any deep breaths, any shakes, stretches, go ahead and take that now. And we're going to move right into that positive memory. So you can keep your eyes closed or continue gazing at the floor in front of you. And take a few deep breaths to sort of just clear the memory and make space for something positive, something that feels good. And in the same way that we deepened into the sensory details of a stressful moment, go ahead and let your body fully associate with the memory of feeling good. And so notice what you saw. Maybe there were clouds in the sky or sunlight filtering through trees. Maybe there was a physical sensation, like toes in the sand. Maybe there were sounds, wind or laughter. Just try to remember, how were you breathing in that moment? How were you holding your face, your jaw? You were smiling. Can you let yourself smile now? And can you let yourself really be in that memory all the way? Because our nervous system has this really curious capacity to not distinguish between perception and reality. So if you can dream it and feel it all the way in this moment, it will be real to your body. Let yourself go there. Take the next 30 seconds to really be with that memory and with the sensation in your body. As you begin to wind down, before you return, notice how you got here. And notice what your body feels like right now. What is it like to be rested and resourced? And can you get back here if you need to? Take a few deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, and in your own time, come back when you're ready. Just curious, and to tell the truth, how many of you were able to feel stress in your body just by imagining it, reading about it, thinking about it? How many of you were able to feel calm and rested and resourced just by diving into that memory? So most people. I think this is important for a lot of reasons. One, so that we can see, in 5 minutes, just using our capacity of attention, we were able to generate different internal experiences on the whole spectrum, from stress to feeling good. So that really tells us the power of our attention, and that where we direct our attention matters in terms of our internal experience. The other important piece, when we think about trauma, the essential defense mechanism or response to trauma is to dissociate. So literally to create a disconnect between the mind and the body. And as adults, many of us have a lot of reasons to not feel safe in our body at this point in our lives. I know for me personally, it's been a long journey of like coming back into my body, one that's ongoing. But for many, many years, I didn't know what stress felt like because I was ignoring all the cues from my body at a great cost to my physical and mental health. So I do this with teachers often because I think it's really important to be highly attuned to our own internal states and sort of recognize the early warning signs of like, oh, this is what stress feels like. And when this comes up, can I make some space for it and be with it? And can I use my attention to get back to baseline? Any other reactions, noticings, questions about that exercise in particular? Yes?
When would be a good time to use that?
For yourself or for your students? Or
For students.
just kind of in general? For students, for most students, I probably wouldn't cue the stressful stimuli.
Yeah.
They have enough of that.
Yeah.
You know, I think any time that they feel safe is a good time to do that.
Okay.
If there's not a cohesive sense of trust and safety in the classroom, I wouldn't do that. But if you feel good that like everybody's good to go there and let themselves feel good, then that's a great time. And that's it. The name for that particular activity is called resourcing. The idea that like we can actually load ourselves up with chemical and physical and psychological resources.
So, I mean, if during the actual event, like your heart started racing or you had trouble breathing or something like that, I mean, does this exercise, if done correctly, actually elicit those same responses?
Totally, yeah. And what I see with clients in therapy often aim for, there's a notion of something called an incomplete autonomic response. And so the idea that in the midst of a stressful or traumatic event, we often dissociate and shut down our response, either because it's so overwhelming we can't deal with it, or because it's culturally, we're like, oh no, don't cry, don't shake, don't be crazy, don't
yeah.
scream.
I mean, my reaction in the moment of this actual event was just to like walk away.
Right.
And,
And what's interesting, I found personally and see with my clients, is our body remembers. And if we don't find a way to consciously let go of that stuff, it's going to be in there. And so what I see often, have you ever seen an animal escape a predator and then get back to safety? And what do? They shake. So using this exercise, usually it takes like 45 minutes instead of 5 minutes. Often people's bodies will start to spontaneously just like twitch and shake and discharge stress in the same way that animals would, because we're animals. Yeah, but that only happens, and there's a fine line there between re-traumatizing and reprocessing.
Right.
And the difference is safety and a sense of solution, that it's not happening all over again.
So, I mean, you chose for us to do something not so a little painful,
Right.
but not so painful.
Yeah.
Because there was a strong response.
Okay. Try
So
to
we would be lying on the floor,
right, shaking.
giving us therapy.
And wailing.
Yeah.
But to get a sense that our body remembers all of these things.
Yeah.
And is queued up to it.
Could part of it be just having students sit with it? Like I'm thinking of, in the case of anxiety, like kids with school refusal who are really anxious to go into a classroom, to be able to sit with it and know that it's going to pass, or to
Yes.
understand that that's what it's about and that in time it'll go away, or how to control it.
Did anyone have that experience as they were tracking their stressful sensation, that it sort of dissipated as they paid attention to it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was just in 5 minutes. So the short answer is yes. I mean, that's like the ultimate goal of mindfulness, in my opinion, is that we can sit with any experience that comes up and be with it. And what, all experiences are rising and falling away, rising and falling away. So in the case of anxiety, I'd say that's an advanced skill, because anxiety is intense. When you feel it's like, I don't want to sit with this, it's horrible. But if you can create enough space around the anxiety, both internally and externally, I don't know if was that Amanda Moreno talking about buffering, to really allow students to, once you get that aha of like, oh, if I don't resist my anxiety, it actually goes away. I don't have to do anything about it.
Right.
And in fact, the more active resistance I create towards my present moment experience, the more suffering I'm creating for myself.
Right.
So it's this quality of non-resistance and just being with the experience that is really freeing.
Mm-hmm.
But hard to do for adults. So students would need a lot of support to really go there and
Right.
do that. Yeah.
I love the thought of just doing the happy place with students, like younger students, just picturing like a happy moment and really going deep into that, and then triggering them like when you're at recess or at lunch, go to that place instead of, you feel your body rising, try to get back to that moment.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that too is it could be imaginary. Because a lot of students would be like, I don't have any happy memories ever.
Right.
Right?
Which is really sad.
So make one up. What would be the happiest thing you could imagine? Fill an empty room with all the things you love or want or desire. That's a great exercise. You can mix that one with gratitude too. Any other questions, thoughts, reactions? If you want, we have a bunch of extra copies of the body map that you could either use for yourself as a reflection on this exercise, or just so we don't waste paper, if you want to take these back to your classroom.
Yeah.
I'll leave them right here.
Could we take a look at the curriculum up there?
Yep, please. We have some printed copies, and then if you want to just browse on a computer, as well as if you haven't signed up, you can either go to our website and just sign up with your email. If you want to write your email here, we'll send you access for the first 5 lessons.
What sheet did you use? Did you have the kids sign up to it?